everyone, and welcome to the ECMPS 2.0 update. I'm Peyton Graney, and I'm a marketing specialist here at ESC Spectrum. In this webinar, our senior regulatory specialist, John Konings, will share what he's learned about the new ECMPS 2.0 tool during beta testing the past 2 months. With that being said, everyone please hold your questions until the end, and you can submit them in the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And I will read them off to John, and he will answer them to the best of his ability. With that, John, you ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready to go, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So let's go ahead and begin. Let's talk about what we're up against today. We're talking about three main items today on today's agenda. We're going to review what we've learned so far about the current round of beta testing for ECMPS 2.0. We introduce options for LME, which is low mass emitting. And I just want to point out up front that both PRISM and StackVision reporting systems can handle LME reporting and have handled LME reporting for a number of years. And the third item we're going to try to address today is to answer your questions. Let's move on. Let's recap first. ECMPS is being re-engineered by the CAMD, the Clean Air Markets Division. Chris Worley of EPA is leading that work, and he actually gave a Zoom presentation back on December 21st outlining what's going on to the stakeholders. His presentation for that December 21st meeting is available on the re-engineering website, and we'll show you that in a second. And like I said, all three of Chris's presentations are available on their website. The beta testing for the monitoring plan portion of the new tool has already begun. It began back on December 21st. And the only part of the records that you can review today are the monitoring plan records. I did find that I will show you where you can get the updated monitoring reporting instructions for the monitoring plan records. The DAS vendors are anxiously waiting to get their hands on the schema. The schema is the document that defines and lays out in detail all the JSON files are to be set up. And initially, as it currently stands, you cannot import or export any files in the beta tool. This will become operational in the spring of 2022, Chris says. And at that time, you'll be able to edit and update monitoring plan records. So here's 3 screenshots of things you need to be aware of. The first is the ECMPS blog, and that's the screen over here in the upper left-hand corner. If you haven't signed up for the blog, you can subscribe to it over here, as I'm indicating with my cursor. And by signing up for the blog, you will get the latest information about the re-engineering process. If you go to the support page over here, and where I'm indicating, that's where it says re-engineering. And this is where you're going to find all the information regarding the re-engineering project, of course. And when you click on this link right here, it opens up this window for the re-engineering. And you'll see that there are webinars, his previous webinars are there for your review. What's my recommendation? My recommendation is to review Chris's webinars. I've reviewed the webinar, Chris's webinar several times, and I'm always impressed because I think he's done a lot to think his way through them, to organize his thoughts, to provide information. I do anticipate that he's going to give a couple of webinars throughout the year. I would expect that as we move from beta testing of the monitoring plans, when we move into the quality assurance and certification records, he'll have a webinar that will explain about that step in the road. And then also, when we move into begin beta testing the emission files later this year, probably in the summertime, he'll have another webinar that will. So I expect him to have 2, 3, or 4 webinars this year. And remember, ECMPS 2.0 will go live in less than a year, meaning any data recorded after January 1st of 2023 is to be processed and submitted using the new ECMPS 2.0 tool. So we don't have much time to get ready for this, and that's why I'm urging you to spend time practicing and playing around with the beta tool on the test site. So far, I can tell you that the new screens look very similar to the screens you are experienced with. Participating in the beta testing is vital to help you make the transition to using the new tool. Yeah, like I said, beta testing for the QA records will start in the spring of 2022. I think in my opinion, we're talking in the April-May timeframe. Chris has also said that beta testing will occur for the emission records beginning in the summer of 2022. And to me, he's probably talking, and again, this is my guess, July and August of this year. So by July and August, all 3 modules will be on the test site. You'll be able to modify monitoring plans. You'll be able to modify and evaluate QA records, and then finally evaluate emission records as well. Again, like I said before, using ECMPS 2.0 will become mandatory for data generated after hour 0 on January 1st of next year, which is 2023. And then the following year, the new MATS reporting records that are required for those units that are MATS reporting units will be required to use to begin submitting those records for any data generated after January 1st, 2024. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. So let's talk about the beta testing for MATS. Starting in January 2024, those units that are using either a SEMS or a mercury trap system to demonstrate MATS compliance will have new reporting requirements. This will require you to update your DAS so that you can now include these records into the EDR, into the JSON formatted EDR files. These new reporting requirements are for quality assurance checks. For example, one example is an absolute correlation audit for a PM SEMS. If you have a PM SEMS, you've been doing these all along, but you really haven't had to include them in your records. Well, now, starting in January 2024, you will have to. And as I've said several times, the new MATS reporting records will be required starting quarter of 2024 for those records generated after January 1st, 2024. And I also list here a couple of other examples of what will be included, including the 30-day boiler operating averages and the beta and the compliance reports, which previously, before January 24, are semi-annual. They now will become quarterly compliance reports. So this beta testing period is a very good opportunity to test out how these new requirements are being handled both by PRISM and StackVision and by ECMPS 2.0. Moving on, let's talk about LME for a second. This is a topic that Chris has talked about several times in his presentations. He has said they are unsure if they're going to continue to maintain the functionality for LME reporting in the new ECMPS 2.0 tool. That was dropped. It could impact about 300 units, which are LME reporting units. And later today, later in this presentation, we will have a survey about trying to get an idea of what percentage of the people out there who are attending this today use ECMPS, the current ECMPS tool, to generate their LME files, as opposed to those who use other means, such as a DAS. I also want to reiterate that Chris Worley said that they were sending out a survey in the spring of 2022, and he actually has mentioned the month of February. Survey would be, again, to determine the impact of not including the LME functionality in ECMPS 2.0. Some people have already pointed out to Chris that if they don't maintain the functionality for LME reporting in ECMPS 2.0, that these utilities will be forced to purchase DAS software to accommodate this change, and that they don't have money in this year's budget for purchasing additional software for LME reporting. So that budget window closed last year, and the need to begin using a different tool for LME reporting starts in January of 2023. So your DAS may need to be ready to produce the necessary ED files for LME reporting in January of 2023. So that's kind of a sticking point for a lot of people. So let's talk about ECMPS 2.0 at ESC Spectrum. Both Prism and StackVision will be updated with the new file generation engines to create the JSON formatted files for QA and emission files. Both apps will be able to generate files in both formats, the current XML and the JSON format. You'll also be updated to accept JSON formatted monitoring plan and QA files. Remember, during the beta testing period, you'll be able to edit existing and create new monitoring plan files as well. And again, like I said before, ESC Spectrum is still waiting for the schemas for these formats to be released by EPA. Chris has said they'll release them as soon as they can, but they have not released them as of yet. People have asked me, well, how do you test the functionality of the new tool? How do you know it's working correctly? And in my opinion, during the beta testing, customers will be encouraged to generate a QA file in the usual XML format, then export it and evaluate it in ECMPS until it's clean. Then generate the same data, the same QA data, in the JSON format in either StackVision or Prism, and evaluate that file in JSON 2.0. The JSON file should be clean and free from errors, as was the XML file. And if not, then you got to figure out why not. So you can do this side-by-side comparison between the file created in the XML format and evaluated in ECMPS and the corresponding JSON file as evaluated by ECMPS 2.0. And when it comes to the emission records, the beta testing for the emission records, I would expect this comparison process, the side-by-side comparison as I just described, would be a good way to evaluate that the functionality of the old tool has been transferred over and maintained properly in the new tool. Again, I want to stress that Chris has said that the current profile of checks will be maintained and no new checks will be added. Therefore, the only major change is the ability to generate and import JSON formatted files. And again, in 2023, this is when the MATS-related reporting requirements will be added to Prism and StackVision for beta testing purposes. And again, if you are a MATS reporting unit, you're going to need to configure properly set up your DAS to export those MATS-related records. And during the beta testing periods, both in 2022 and 2023, it's an excellent time to work through the new changes in both your DAS and the evaluation tools becoming available in ECMPS 2.0. And I want to stress you should familiarize yourself with the sequence of steps to change or add new monitoring plans and new QA records, and how to import them and how to evaluate them. So here's a screenshot showing you the CDX, or the Central Data Exchange, as it's called, where you can go to the site, and it's listed here for you on this slide, where you can register for a name and a password in the test environment. Now let me back up here and say that if you already have a username and a password for the CDX system, that's fine, but you need a separate one for the beta testing area. So if you are somebody who uses the CDX already, you would therefore have two separate usernames and passwords, one for the actual official submittal that you've been doing, and then one for the beta testing, and only the beta testing. Moving on, this is what the actual ECMPS beta webpage looks like. Here's a link to how to get there. And after you established your username and password at the CDX Central Data Exchange, which was on the previous page, you now can come to the testing site and use that same information to log in to the testing site. And the login is shown here on the screen print right here, where you can see my cursor moving around. That's where you can log in. Down below, you can see an example of monitoring plan records. You don't necessarily need to log in to look at monitoring plan records. These are publicly available. These are a copy of the monitoring plan records that were on file on the EPA's host computer system several months back. But you don't even really need to log in to look at the files, but you will need to log in to edit or manipulate the files. I do want to point out that under the resource area on the main menu, I found an updated copy of the reporting instructions for the monitoring plan records using the JSON format. And so it also looks like you can see here that there are several other links to other bits of information that are relevant and important. So I want to make sure you are aware that under the resources, there is information, valuable information that are available for you. I also want to point out along the left side of the home page, it's divided into two sections. One is the home section, and the other section is called the workspace. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that here in a minute. Like I said, the home section is where records for monitoring plans, QA, and certification and emission records can be viewed. The workspace area, which is the space below it, is where these records can actually be opened and edited. And that requires you to log in. So again, it goes back, you need to make sure you establish that username and passwords for the beta testing area only, and then use it when you get here to become familiar with the layout of the ECMPS 2.0. You can see here when you click plan, it will now show you a display of all the monitoring, all the facilities that are part of the ECMPS tool. And if you click on an individual facility, it will give you a breakdown of what monitoring plan records are available. This is an example of a power plant in Alaska. Matter of fact, that's the only coal-fired power plant in Alaska. And it shows that there are two sets of monitoring plan records for units 1 and 2 at the Healy generating station. You can see over here that you can actually open these files, where I'm indicating with my cursor. Moving on, you'll note that the QA at CERT plus the emissions area says that the data for these 2 areas are not included in the initial release. These areas will be updated later as those 2 sections move into beta testing as well. Working with the monitoring plan records, initially only copies of the monitoring plan records will be available. You can select a copy of the monitoring plan record and edit it or update it. And all monitoring plan records for all the facilities are available in the test environment. So Chris asks that you, during the beta testing, you be respectful and try to limit yourself to facilities that you are familiar with or that you are assigned to work on. And remember, this is a separate test area. Changes you make here will not impact or are not reflected in the actual monitoring plan records on file on the USA and EPA's host computer system. This is a separate test area. It is not, any changes you make here will not be populated to the official computer system. So far what we have learned, we're learning just how to move around in the new tool. The layout of the main screens are very similar to the existing tools, so this makes me feel comfortable moving around, something I'm already familiar with. Although I will point out there are some small, subtle differences, and we'll even point out a couple of those. Chris has said that they are working on a development cycle of 2 weeks, meaning about every other week, new features will be added. And when new features are added, there should be release notes that go with them to explain what the changes are. I did not catch in Chris's presentation where these release notes will be, so we'll have to kind of keep our eyes open for that. You're in the workspace to review or edit an existing monitoring plan or items. There's an evaluation section where it will tell you the status of the monitoring plan records in the beta test area. Does it need evaluation? Are there critical errors around? Also submission status. Does this record need to be submitted or has it been submitted? There's another area where you can check back in the changes you've made into the database. And one feature that's been added that I really like is you can revert back to the official record. So if you've been playing around in the monitoring plans for a facility and you've been making changes and all this and that, and now you're kind of done and you want to start over, you can revert back to the official record and start over from scratch. So this is a useful tool that's been added to ECMPS 2.0. We've also learned in the upper right-hand corner is a drop-down menu, which gives you links to other areas of interest. And these are the 6 areas that are listed. Some of them go nowhere because I think they're just not ready yet. But the first 2 I know, they do link you to other websites under the EPA. Now, when you actually open up a monitoring plan record, you will see the methods. You will see all the tabs. The various tabs of the monitoring plan records are displayed in a drop-down menu format. And that's kind of different from the way ECMPS currently is used. You might remember that as you open up the records, the tabs are listed horizontally from left to right. So this is a small change. I don't think it's a big deal, but it is a small change. And again, along the right side, you can see where, and I'm indicated with my cursor, you can see the evaluation status. You can also see the submission status. And you can also see where you have the opportunity to revert back to the official record, start over again. I also want to point out to you that in this particular slide, you can see that I have logged in and that I am in the workspace area where now you can make changes. And that's indicated down here where you can view and edit the actual records themselves. As you make changes to a file, you can evaluate those changes, and if acceptable, you can save them. If you execute the evaluation process, a separate email response is generated by ECMPS 2.0, and it lists the results of that evaluation. For example, the copy of the evaluation email that I got back showed that there were critical errors. So in the past, when you would do an evaluation, you would get a screen that showed you the evaluation results. Now, instead of getting that same screen, you're going to get a separate email, and it arrived pretty quickly, I'd say within 10-15 seconds. And it shows you, and it also gives you a link to where you can get that same report again. So that's a little different than what we've seen in the past. So what have we really learned so far? To be honest with you, not as much as I'd like. I was hoping there'd be more progress. But I need to stress we are becoming familiar with the various screens. And the various screens, the new tool, are very similar to the screens of the existing tool, which is helpful. And as a sort of comment, I just want to add that the monitoring plan records are fairly stagnant, meaning that typically you need to review your monitoring plan records and make any necessary changes maybe once a year or so. Whereas the QA records and the emission records, they vary from quarter to quarter depending upon the QA activities you're doing that quarter. For example, you do a RADA probably once a year. So the other 3 quarters, there are no RADA records. And for that 1 quarter, there are. So there's a lot more variety when it comes to the QA and CERT and emission records than there are to the monitoring plan records. And again, I expect that the beta testing for QA and CERT and emissions will be much more lively and interesting than what we've seen so far for the monitoring plans. What's coming next? I just want to take this opportunity to remind people that starting in 2024, that a lot more MATS-related reporting is required. And this is information from the stack testers. And this is the information related to either performance evaluation testing, such as RADAs, or routine stack testing, such as quarterly or annual compliance testing. So that information is all laid out in Appendix E to subpart U. Yep, that's 5 U's. And Appendix E is called data elements, and that's where it lays this all out. So you need to be aware that the stack testers need to provide a lot more information starting on January 1st, 2024 for any testing done after that date. You need to make sure you remind your stack testers that you need to get that data from them in the JSON formatted file correctly, formatted as required and as laid out by those reporting instructions. Now moving on, let's talk about LME for a second. And this is where we're going to do a survey. Currently, StackVision and Prism both support LME reporting, but we will also offer a new product called LME Vision, which is a customized approach to your LME reporting needs. ESE Spectrum needs or wants to know who is currently using ECMPS to generate their EDR files for your LME reporting. And that's why we're going to use a survey at this time to find out from you how many of you people out there are actually MPS for generating your EDR files. So I'm going to turn this back to Pete and ask her to conduct the survey.
Yeah, so there is a poll on your screen right now, and it's just going to ask you so we can get a little idea right now, how many of you use ECMPS to generate LME files? We're also going to send out a follow-up survey after this presentation to get more detailed information from you. But right now, we just want to get a gauge. And it looks like we're getting about 30% yes and 70% no. So
while the survey is being taken, let me just add a little information for you. It's been my experience when I was a utility customer that we did use ECMPS to generate our LME files, and there are several ways of doing that. One way is to manually enter the operating data that's necessary, and this is typically the number of minutes in a given hour the unit operated and the load that it achieved for that hour. So you can enter that data by hand and then process that data through ECMPS and generate the EDR file and evaluate it. That's one way. The second way, which is the way we used to do it, is we kept track of that operating time and other information on a clipboard, and then we used an Excel spreadsheet to enter that data, and then from Excel we exported out a CVS, comma separated value formatted file that was acceptable to ECMPS, and we imported the data that way into ECMPS, and again processed it. So that's a little bit more complicated. And a third way you can do it, if you want to get your operating data into StackVision and Prism, is through a data controller. So as you can see, there are several different ways that you can handle getting information into ECMPS, and assumably the new ECMPS tool related to monitoring plan for information for LME reporting. So with that being said, how are we doing on the survey, Peyton?
the results came in, and it looks like 31% of people on this webinar right now are using ECMPS to generate LME files.
Interesting.
And yes, it is interesting. And so, as I said before, we'll send out a follow-up email with a more detailed survey with some more fields for you to fill out if you're interested in our new LME Vision service.
All right, let's wrap things up. We all know there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and I personally think the log jam will kind of burst forth in 2022 and 23 and 24. It'll be an interesting time for all of our utility customers, and especially busy for those that are MATS reporting facilities. So I recommend and suggest you keep watching for those future webinars from Chris as we move from 2022 and 2023. And more importantly, it's encouraging. I urge you to reach out to Chris if you have questions or issues or whatever else. And let me explain why I'm urging you to contact him. You are part of the regulated community, and therefore you are directly impacted by what EPA does. Yes, it's easy for ESE Spectrum to work with EPA because we represent so many different facilities and utilities, but we are technically not part of the regulated community. You are. And so when you send emails or when you contact EPA or Chris, they're supposed to sit up and pay attention to you because you are directly impacted by what they do. So yes, we do take the opportunity to communicate with Chris as much as we can, but I encourage you as a member of the regulated community to do that as well. So at this point, I'd like to open up for any questions or comments that anybody might have. We'll do the best we can to answer them for you.
Okay, so we have quite a few questions, and I'm not sure if you covered this one already because this one came through kind of midway through the presentation, but someone asked, will you be able to upload past EDRs, QA monitoring plans into ECMPS 2.0, or will you still use the old ECMPS client?
It is my opinion that if you have to resubmit a quarter in which you did it with the old ECMPS tool or the original ECMPS tool, that you'll have to resubmit using that same tool. In other words, if you had to resubmit something for 2021 and you use the old tool for that, and let's say you discovered in 2023 you needed to make that update or make that revision, I believe they're going to ask you to do it with the old tool and not the new tool. But certainly that's another question that we can bring to Chris's attention, and I believe it has been brought to his attention about these resubmissions. So I hope that helps you understand what's going on.
Great. All right, and someone else asked, if you have a monitoring plan change that you need to make now, can you experiment with it in the beta system and get a correct unofficial evaluation and then go into the current ECMPS and receive the same results?
Yes, matter of fact, that's exactly what I did do. I made a change at one of the monitoring plan for the Healy facility that you saw in my example. I know that they made a change that was not reflected in the beta site. And so I made the same change in the beta site and evaluated cleanly. And then I went to my copy of ECMPS and made the change there and got the exact same results. So yes, if you need to make a change, and a good way to evaluate whether that change is the appropriate change is do it the beta site first and get it cleaned up that way. And then move on, go back to the ECMPS current tool and make it there, and the two sets of results should match.
Awesome. Okay. And someone asked, when signing up for CDX login, what active program should be selected? I don't see ECMPS as an option.
You don't, and if you, again, I point you to look at Chris's presentation. In his presentation, he says pick any program. This is a test site. It does not matter at all which program you pick. So he clearly states pick any program you want.
And then someone asked if StackVision currently generates JSON formatted EDRs, and if not, when?
I believe that StackVision and Prism both today do not generate JSON files because the EPA has not released the schema for the formatting of those files. I'm sure that the StackVision development people and the Prism development people know how to do it. They just need to see the actual roadmap, i.e. the schemas, so that they can get it right. Without the schemas, they would just simply be guessing. So we need the schemas from EPA to tell us the details so that they can set up the JSON files correctly.
And last question, will EPA eventually explain the differences in roles in the CDX system?
I would expect so. But again, I would email Chris directly if that's something you really needed to see or wanted to see, and ask him to include that topic in his next webinar.
All right, and I think that's all the questions for today.
Well, I want to thank everybody for taking time to join us today. I hope we've been able to give you some useful information about the ECMPS reengineering process. As you can see on the screen, you can contact me by email as it's listed there, or you can contact me by phone. You're always welcome to get a hold of me, and stay tuned for the next webinar in probably a couple of months again with another update. So thank you so much for coming, and hope we've been helpful.